Welcome to a special episode of My Relationship with Money series. We will explore how our guest expert evolved his relationship with money. We will consider the early stages as a little kid during his high school age, then after his first full-time job or business, to now. Integrity, unity, wholeness, honesty, ethics, and morals. These are words I can relate to our guest. What makes him special is that he is someone with integrity and he is dedicated to his work. He used to be a top performing branch manager at a major bank. Now I know him as a mentor. He is currently a regional vice president at Mortgage Alliance. Please welcome David Gyurits.
Thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate it. Great to be here today. I'm excited.
Thank you. So let's start with who you are and tell us about your current roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm currently a regional vice president with Mortgage Alliance. So I have the pleasure of working with, mentoring a team of mortgage brokers and agents and team leaders. We have different relationships with our brokers. Great role. It just gives me a lot of freedom, flexibility to work with you guys, work with great entrepreneurs like yourself and everyone else. So I get to help them, to build and grow their business, get started, or take their business to the next level. At Mortgage Alliance, we work with a lot of other industry stakeholders and professionals. We work a lot with. I was on the board of directors with Mortgage Professionals Canada for 4 years, which is an amazing learning experience working alongside some of our industry's awesome leaders. So that was probably one of the best highlights of my career for sure. But yeah, it just gives me a lot of freedom. At Mortgage Alliance, we're very flexible. Someone like both of us, we came from the banking world, and you're there for a long time. You meet great people. It's a great place to learn. But you're like, hey, you know what? I think there's something more out there. I want that next level. And I've been able to come to say, hey, as people move on, it's just to see them grow and do more and have more flexibility to be a business owner. So I think that's one of the things I really enjoy is helping people build and grow their business, become a good person, and good parts of the community. Community involvement is very important to us as well. So yeah, that's a bit of what I do.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for being here. Now, in our series, we're basically focusing on money and your relationship with money. What is your first memory about money?
It's a really good question. And I think sometimes people ask, okay, what was your first job? And I was lucky or maybe a bit unlucky. We grew up. We have a family apple farm in St. George. So I would go with my uncle and my dad to the Kitchener Farmers Market, and I would help them sell apples. And you learned at I think I started when I was 7 or 8 years old. To have a good relationship in terms of meeting people, and I was able to talk to people with different types of apples, and just I felt it very comfortable, right? So it's kind of led to me being in this role today. You like talking with people. So I was quite young, and I was earning an income, right? So I was able, to buy my own stuff and that. Unfortunately, when I was younger, probably didn't have the best relationship with money. You can say maybe I didn't like it because I kept spending it. So I would, what's that toy? I want my first shoes. So I'd buy GI Joes and Transformers and stuff. And so yeah, that was probably my first relationship because I was quite young. I was able to have a job, so I was able to kind of learn from a young age to go out and save for something and get up and I was able to save for stuff. But when I was younger, no, my relationship I liked to spend money, so that was unfortunately probably led me into my career because I had I wasn't the greatest with money in my younger years. So you got to learn some great lessons that I get to now pass on to people when we're giving them advice, right?
So who was your, let's say, first teacher about money? Would it be your parents or anybody specific?
A bit of my parents, yeah. Probably I had some really, I was lucky younger, and when I was young, I started off working, one of my part-time jobs, I worked in the pros department at Zehrs, and had some really good, met some older friends. And it was good for me at the time at that age because I was maybe 23, 24, and they were like, almost 30. And really taught me about money and saving and getting for a house and not being an idiot and just being I was young, a little bit stupid. So it was good to see, oh wow, okay, these guys are doing it this way. Okay, you got to save this much. And I had a couple of guys that were quite good and smart, astute investors as well. So I was able to say, hey, and it's a good time for me to have. It's one thing for your parents to do it, but when you have your friends and your peers can show you that, I think that really started me down the right path of having a much better relationship with my finances, right, and getting it under control. And I can also say too, is even younger in life, like you get married too, it's a good thing because when you're single, you go spend what you want, but now you're accountable to someone else, right? So I think that my wife, and both of us had, we weren't the greatest with money when we were younger, but when you're accountable to someone else, it's different, right? So I think that's kind of helped things to make me more accountable. As my wife and I, we have a rule. It's anything over $500, we consult each other, right? So that's kind of our rule. It's anything over $500, we're not going to go out, and so I'm not going to show up one day with a card and say, honey, look what I bought. No, it doesn't work that way. So we try to, I think that's helped me out when I was younger too.
Now, looking back when you were in high school, did you get an allowance?
No, because I always worked, right? Because I was able, like my dad was also a landscaper too, so I would also work with him. Or I'd go to the farmer's market, right? So I was always earning an income. So I never quasi had an allowance because I was always working. So, and I think it was good for me because working in landscaping and even like on the farm too was great because it really motivated me to go to school because you realize how tough it is to do those jobs, right? So it's a very, very tough job. So for me, it was a great learning experience to be able to do a really tough, hard day's work. And it gives you that good work ethic, right? Which is, I think, no matter what field you get into, if you don't have a good work ethic, it's not going to matter, right? So I think that was that helped me.
Now, obviously, you were in high school. You were working part time. You were earning some money. Was there a purchase or a splurge that you can think of back in high school that you made?
I think my very first thing I saved up for is actually the one year when I was like, I think 14, 15. It's like early 90s, hockey, baseball cards were very, it was a big push. So actually I would I would sell them at different hockey card stores. And so I would go to the one flea market actually in St. George. I did that all summer, and I saved up to get a JVC Ghetto Blaster. And it was like when CD players were first coming out, I wanted it, and I saved up all, and I was able to purchase it, right? At the time it was probably like $800, which is expensive. So that was really my first thing I learned to really save up for and want. It's a funny thing, actually, I still have it. It's kind of quasi-works, which is crazy. But I think I just kept it because it was the first thing I really, chose to build up and to have a goal, I guess you could say.
Well, that's one of the main reasons for money, right? So it's something that you can save, something that you can invest, but more importantly, to acquire stuff. And no different than you in the early years, there was always a goal to buy something at JVC.
For sure, yeah, classic. Oh yeah, that's yes. Yeah. It was awesome. Like the top-loading CD player too. So yeah, it was really old school.
So what was so from high school? I'm assuming you were working part-time to finish college, university. What was your first full-time job?
First full-time would have been technically full-time. Well, technically, for one summer, I worked full-time as a produce manager at the time for IGA. So that was technically my first full-time. I was worked part-time. And then after that, I started at Scotiabank as a PBO, a personal banking officer out of university. So that was my first career job, I guess you'd say. I did one summer as a full-time produce manager, but then I went back to school and just finished, and then I started my career. And it's funny because I remember getting my first full-time job, like when I was at the bank. I'm like, because when you're part-time, it's great. I'll work 2 days, I'll have 3 days off. It's fine. Then you're actually working full-time. It's like, darn, you have nothing. I have to work full-time forever now. It sucks. So I remember thinking, this is kind of depressing, but it's life, right? But it was interesting, like making that transition from part-time into full-time, right?
So from somebody that's working part-time in high school, working in IGA, to somebody that's working at the bank, I'm assuming you had to level up your understanding of money. You had to have a better grasp on, I guess, a slew of different products, anywhere from savings, investments, credit, and everything. How did that happen? How did that occur?
Well, the thing is, it's funny. I always knew, and it's boring. I wanted to be something in banking, right? Because and I was like, it's so weird. When I was, I think 7 years old, I was a ring bearer for my cousin's wedding, and she gave me a pen set. Right? And I'm like, I'm going to put that on my desk. I now still have it. It's actually on my desk. And I'm like, I want to be in business in some sort of way. So that was kind of my thing. But through my mid 20s, was I great with money? No, I wasn't. So it took me probably 27, 28 when I started really figuring out when I got into the role in banking and stuff and seeing what could happen. And it really was a good eye-opening experience for me to say, hey, this is how you got back on, right? This is how you get back on track. This is how you save for your retirement, how you save for a house. So it's that kind of taught me, and a couple times I'm like, oh crap, when I got into it, I'm like, oh, you need to get your socks in order here. So it was a really good learning experience for me to get to that point, saying, oh crap, if I keep going down this path, this is what can happen. And I had a good person at the bank show me, hey, you're here now, you need to get this, because if you keep spending the way you do, this is going to get worse. Right, so it was a really good learning experience for me. Then, of course, at the bank you take all the financial courses and stuff too, so you get on how to save, how to budget. And I think budgeting for me was a really big thing in terms of setting up a budget. You know, how much can you spend every week? You know, like a question that I was asked. It's like, well, how much after you get paid, how much do you have left to spend? I didn't know that, right? And it's a good question for all of us. Like, how much do you have to have in your bank account every month to pay your bills? And I thought, oh, I didn't know that. So now, like, I'm anal. I have spreadsheets. I track everything, and it just, you know, I do every 6 months. I do a spreadsheet. I track my net worth to see where things are going. So I'm very anal with it. But if you don't track it, it can get out of hand. But for me, it was just, you know, seeing what other people were going through, and it was also a good experience for me too, being in banking, saying, hey, I've been there. I've had debt. This is how you can get out of it, right? So I was able to empathize with people more. So I think that's kind of what motivated me to get into this, because I was one of them that, you know, struggled. And a lot of people struggle. Budgeting is hard for everyone, right? You know, and especially, you know, with the pandemic, people are, you know, are struggling with it more. But it's a good thing now, and I think in school they're trying to teach it more, because, you know, and like, I had no idea how a credit card worked, and well, I did, but I was probably more than others. But most people, like, you know, we should be teaching this grade 9. How does a bank account work? How do you balance your budget? You know, what can happen? And we were talking even before about, I was able to mess up at a young age. But if this was today, and I was in that case, like, I was still able to buy a house when I was 24 and had debt, right? You know, I worked full time. I also had a part-time job, but there's no way in this market I would have been able to get a house, right? And it just, so that is, I'm trying to, you know, educate younger people and saying, unfortunately, you guys don't have as much leeway as we did back in the day, right? You know, like I said, like, my first house, you know, in 2003 was $155,000 for a 1,400 square foot townhouse. You know what? 20 years later, that house is now $750,000. And the job I had at the time, you know, it doesn't pay much more than it did back then. So that's you know, for first-time homebuyers, it's they have to be, unfortunately, they need to be, you know, smarter, younger, because there's not as much leeway for them to have that mess up. So it's you feel tough for kids these days.
That's a good point. Now, right now, you're a mentor, you're a leader at Mortgage Alliance, which is one of the top biggest mortgage brokerages in Canada. Mm-hmm. You're an industry expert. You're an expert and a leader. How do you see money now?
You know, I think it's just, I have a better relationship with it in total, because, and I think it's one thing that really taught me is, you know, you can't think, oh, I deserve this. Some people say, oh, I'm going to take a trip. I deserve it. I'm going to put on my credit card, right? And you learn, like, you know, things are earned, not deserved, right? So you really kind of put in place, okay, what can I afford? Do I have money for this? How's this going to affect me long term? What is my goal? When do I want to retire, right? When, you know, so that's just, my wife and I are very kind of driven in terms of setting goals and knowing where we're going to go. And it's just, I think it just, you know, budgeting helped, right? You know, for, like, you know, knowing how much you can spend, where not to spend. You know, I've had to work really hard to get to where I am. I did these really, you know, crappy jobs. I can see where it is, and maybe I'm just a bit more anal now, just saving more, because I don't want to be in that position again, right? So fear sometimes is good. If you use it in the right way, fear can be good, and it can kind of hopefully lead you down, hopefully, the correct path. Okay, I don't want to go there. I want to stay over here, right? And I think even for me too, even for mental health, you know, having debt, not being able to make your payments, it can affect your overall health too. So I find, you know, now that I have a better relationship and I can, you know, balance myself out more, I'm not as stressed, because I remember getting my first house and I still had debt. I was so stressed, right? So it's just, you know, it just helps your overall well-being, and, you know, just you have to find different ways, whatever works for you. So yeah, I just think just, you know, getting control of it, and a lot of people, they don't want to look at it, but you have to take ownership of it. Okay, where I'm at now, how does it work? So yeah, that's the thing for me. You know, it's just.
Our series is about relationship with money.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a husband.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a couple of times that your wife is obviously somebody that's great, and somebody that you talk about budgets with. But
mm-hmm.
how would you say your relationship as a household? Do you have your individual budgets, or is it one budget for yourself and your wife? Was there any friction at first?
Domestics.
Because obviously you earn your money, you have your own
mm-hmm.
income, and in all likelihood there might be, you know, a shirt or a car, shoes that you might like. But how do you incorporate your individual income into basically a household?
It's a really good question, and I think so. When we got married, a lot of couples, what they do is they have one account, and they put everything there, and they spend their money.
Yeah.
That to me, in my opinion. So what we actually do is, and we have all joint accounts, but I have a bill account, my wife has a bill account, our pays go into them separately. right? And then I have a separate amount of a spending account where I spend from, right? So then every month, every pay, automatically, whatever my spending goes into that account. Now, all our accounts are joint, so we can see everything. But to us, it was just, we found it like, okay, you're going out and spending money from one account, he's going out and spending. So we actually have technically separate, but they're still joint. So we can see them, we can track it, we know what's going on. But my spending account is separate from my wife's spending account. And I find it's easier to track stuff. Like I have probably 15 different bank accounts. Like I have an account, so my pay goes in, I have money that goes into a gift account for every month for gifts. We have a dog and a cat account. We put money away every month for our dog and cat expenses, right? We have a vacation account. I have like a account for you. So we have all separate stuff put ahead for all these little things, because this way I know it's going to be allocated, right? And we can track it, and then we set up automatic transfers on when our pay goes in. And it's yeah, so technically you could say it's separate, but for us it was just, we found it, okay, Dave's gonna go and spend this, from one account. We thought that would be a little difficult. So what we do is we have separate accounts, but they're both joint, but I use one primarily, she uses one primarily, but if something happens, of course, they're visible to all of us, right? So it's not like we both can see exactly what's going on, but we just thought it'd be too hard sharing an account, right? And some people do it and they like it, and it's the thing I think with my wife and I is we're both in finance and we're both type A people. We like control, so one account probably wouldn't be the best thing. So for the benefit of our marriage, probably works out better.
So you're able to have combined household expenses together, but you have your individual personal expenses that you can.
So we have certain things that come out of my account, certain things comes out of my wife's account, and we just kind of split it up that way in terms of what's fair and equitable, in terms of what makes sense for me to pay and what makes sense for her to pay. We both have, in terms of joint, like we save quite a bit. We try to be quite, we like to go out and eat and stuff, but but we're, the only thing we'd ever finance is either a car or a house. Right, it would not happen. So we would not finance anything other than a car and a house. So that's we're quite lucky to be that. We're in a different situation. We don't have kids, so we should be in a better situation, right? So that's afforded us and to be in a better situation. Then if someone has kids, of course, it's a different story, right? And the kids are a little expensive. So we have pets that are expensive, but not as much as kids. So yeah, so that works for us. Right? It's we make everything joint and visible, so I can see all her accounts, she can see all mine, but we just use one account for our own individual spending and bill payments.
Okay, now moving forward, do you still have any future financial goals, or maybe what would a rich life look like for David Gyurits, 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, like we have goals to pay off our house, so that's will be done shortly, and then we have in terms of other long-term goals, I think we just look at what I would do long-term, right? Something probably, my wife is very into health and wellness, so after she's maybe done with her mortgage career, she may do something in the health and wellness field. That's what she's really passionate about. I'm really passionate with animals, so I may do something with that. It could be that. I'm also into old like Star Wars collectibles and stuff and that. So I have one buddy, he actually has like an online business that he does, so we could do something like that. So that would maybe something after you get all your goals set and who you are for your retirement. That's something that we may want to do. So that's kind of something like that maybe.
Now, maybe one last question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you, if you had an opportunity to talk to your younger self,
mm-hmm.
what would you tell the young David Gyurits in high school, or when you were much younger? What would you tell? Maybe top 3 suggestions that you would, financial suggestions that you would have for yourself.
Set a budget and stop spending like an idiot. Basically, I just didn't track, right? So that's the big thing. You realize what you track and what you analyze gets done correctly. So I think just not, sticking to a budget, right? And realizing the implications of buying that stuff. Or I was young, I liked nice cars and stuff too, so I'd fix up cars, and you'd spend money on car rims and stuff for just prioritizing. And you're young and you have to make mistakes, so it happens to all of us. But I think it's just what's a priority, right? How's that going to affect you getting a house in your long term? And sometimes when you're young, you don't see how this can affect you. And I can speak from experience. It took me a few years to get back into a good financial footing, right? Wherein it took a lot of extra work, a lot of extra hours I had to take off to pay off that stuff, right? So it was a good lesson to learn. And I think I would really tell myself, just look at your budget. Does this make sense? Just take your time. You don't have to have everything right away. you know, and it will come in time. But just I think paying attention to, you know, what's your budget, and you know, you have to realize, okay, I don't have money for that. Your credit card is not, it's not your pay, right? So that's it. But again, it was a very good lesson for me to learn that when you learn the hard way, right? So yeah, no, I would say that for sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I know there's a lot of personal things that you've been able to share with us. I guess we now know that, you know, looking at where you are today, you wouldn't have thought that you would have had scenarios where you would have fallen or you would have made mistakes, but I guess that's all part of learning. We all have to, you know, buy the car or buy the boom box.
You have to make that stupid mistake, right? You're like, what am I doing,
and
right? And that's part of growing up, right? And unfortunately, you know what, you can tell someone in any situation, but until they want to believe it or they want to own it, it's not going to happen, right? So everyone comes to that at a different point. Some don't, you know, and that's part of our job, right? We're here to help people to get them on that, and that's why I think maybe I'm in this. Is it's nice to. There's nothing better than helping someone to come over money issues. They say the two biggest worries in life are you know, love and money, right? We can help with one of them, so you know, that's it's a good thing to have.
Well, thank you again.